Welcome to another episode of the Client Experience Architect podcast. I'm your host, Zach Hoskins, and it is my passion to guide you through crafting unique experiences for your clients to help you both maximize the value you bring and create a sales force of ranting, raving fans out there promoting your business. It is my pleasure to bring to you businesses who are crushing it with intentional customer-centric experiences and dive into what that looks like now, what it has looked like over the life of the business, and what it will look like in the future of their business. My goal is that you can snag some valuable insights to implement into your business after listening. Let's dive in. This episode is brought to you by the Client Experience Architect System. The Client Experience Architect System is my passion to guide you through crafting unique experiences for your clients so you create a sales force of raving fans and so your business can thrive. The reason behind my passion is that there is a huge lack of systems and tools in this space available and affordable for small to medium-sized businesses. Currently, these tools are only available through large marketing agencies and can cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to implement. Out of that fact, I have synthesized a system with these same tools and have made it available and affordable for you. Head over to clientexperiencearchitect.com/raving fans to begin your journey of creating a sales force of raving fans to promote your business. And now, back to the show. On this episode, it is my pleasure to share with you my conversation with Clancy Parks, founding attorney of Parks & Jones Attorneys at Law. His law firm is a full-service estate planning and elder law office working to provide peace of mind to their clients and their families. They are committed to personal service to each client, using only the legal tools and techniques that suit the individual client's needs, goals, and personal situation. The value that Clancy is able to bring to the table regarding his experience with his clients and truly creating raving fans is unmatched. Our conversation was fun and full of wisdom. Excited to share this one with you guys. Listen in on my conversation with Clancy Parks. My dear friend Clancy, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast.
I'm delighted to be here at 7 a.m. in my new kitchen that we just moved into a month ago, and never thought I'd have a podcast interview at this cool little table.
Well, perfect. I'm glad to give you that opportunity. So let's begin by giving our audience a little bit of context, diving into your background as far as it goes pertains to business, how your business got to where it is now and where you think it's going in the future. That kind of just some context.
When I'm asked those kind of questions, I go all the way back to when I was 10 years old in the car with my dad driving north of Carthage, Missouri. And he just made the offhanded comment, you know, Clancy, if you get a law degree and a business degree, the sky is the limit on what you can do. So fast forward to college. I finished college. I've got my first job coordinating events at a multi-purpose center in Tulsa, Oklahoma, working many, many hours, average 75 to 80 hours a week, but wasn't making a whole lot of money. And at that point, I remembered what my dad said. And so I checked out law school. And fortunately, I got in. I got some scholarships. Ended up number 11 in my class, and there were more than 12, so that was actually good. Nobody ever asks you what your class rank is, so any opportunity I have to tell the public, sure. I do. But the reason I share that is that rank enabled me during law school to get the plum jobs. I clerked for a federal judge. I worked in the counsel's office for a major oil company, and I clerked at then Springfield's largest law firm. I hated all three jobs.
Wow.
So what am I going to do? Well, my dad, after World War II, went to dental school on the GI Bill and built a dental practice out of nothing. His mother, my grandmother, after her husband died tragically in 1927, decided to build on her own the Carthage credit bureau. And so she ruled that town for 40 years, determining who got credit and who didn't. And my mother was a successful real estate agent here in Springfield and in Branson. So I had a history of entrepreneurs that gave me the confidence as I was making my decisions in law school to strike out on my own. And so I spent some time learning a specialty in tax law called 1031 exchanges that enables people to sell real estate that has appreciated in value, allows them to sell it, buy new property within a certain amount of time, and avoid paying the capital gains tax on that first sale. Well, Branson, Missouri was the perfect place to do that type of work in 1993 because the IRS and the Treasury had promulgated new regulations that gave us certainty on how to do these exchanges. I happened to just reach out to the gentleman who wrote the treatise on 1031 exchanges. A shout out to Jeremiah Long from Seattle, who has since passed. But he took a liking to me and took me under his wing. And like someone had done for him 50 years prior, he taught me everything that I needed to know about this particular area of the law and basically gave me a career. And so there I was in Branson, Missouri, attempting to do 1031 exchanges, and I still remember the very first one. Thank goodness I went bald early because I was all of 28 years old, and I escrowed $1,240,000 for this gentleman. And had he known it was my first exchange and was merely 28 years old, I doubt I'd have got the client. So a few good things have come from early baldness. But anyway, it was out of that experience, Zach, that I met taxpayers who had estates that needed to be planned, meaning they had real estate or investments, children, grandchildren, with all different types of circumstances. And that led me into really the center of what I'm good at, and that is estate planning law, where, I'm meeting people every day where we're dealing with the issues of disability, dying, how to protect surviving spouses, how to leave property to children in a way that it will be a blessing to them and not a curse. So that fits my personality because I think my unique ability in all of this is that I have a really good emotional IQ. And that, in your list of questions that you provided me, that was really what jumped out in my mind as for me to create the client experiences that I have and now our firm does. It takes an incredible amount of emotional intelligence.
Interesting. Well, thanks for giving us some of that context. I want to sit there on the emotional intelligence for a little bit. Can you unpack how you became aware of that? Was that intentional, or do you think that was something that was, not intentional, just came about as you grew up? Or
Well, as the firm has grown from 1 to now 13 of us, I do know that emotional IQ can be taught or at least discovered, okay? It takes a certain intentional awareness of yourself and others that many people simply just don't uncover. I think because of, my circumstances of being adopted, then those adoptive parents divorced, and other challenges I had as a kid, that enabled me at a younger age to discover the emotional intelligence that I had. So I guess I would say I think we all have it, probably in varying degrees, but for people who appear to have none, I think there are ways to uncover that. And, even in my practice today, one of my missions is to help uncover that for the people that, we work together.
That's awesome. All right. So take us into the actual business. Talk to me about some of the touch points. Like, what touch points are most important in your view in your business?
Well, I'm not exactly sure what you mean by a touch point. You're using new age language, but I will attempt to answer that by saying I'm very aware that when a client comes to the firm, they are stressed because they're finally having to deal with their own mortality. And that is not pleasant. They also have preconceived notions on what it's like to deal with an attorney. Most of my clients have never needed an attorney until they come to see me. So it is with that knowledge that I've tried to create a client experience that communicates peace of mind and competence and relief. And so we do things from, the way our office is decorated, to the hospitality that we provide when they come in, to the actual meeting between the attorney and the client. All of those things have been discussed and thought about, maybe not to the nth degree, but I'm aware of how the stage needs to be set so it's more likely for a client to hear what they need to hear so that they can then be motivated to take action.
Gotcha. Good point.
So that was a touch point? I'm not sure.
Yeah. Okay, so you touched on a little bit about how your business is customer centric. Can we kind of stay there for a little bit and kind of unpack a little bit more on how your business is preparing, your employees, the interactions that you have? How are you intentionally making those customer centric?
Well, you said the phrase customer centric, and it reminds me of something my dad also told me growing up. He said, Clancy, and he was a doctor, so he used the word patient. He said, I can't treat my patients any better than I treat my staff. And I've tried to live by that rule that, the staff has to be attended to and understood, and, there's emotional intelligence in that. If your staff is not set, then your client experience will be diminished, if not ruined. So that's why we have now an operations manager who's a trained psychologist who helps with maintaining the staff and giving them the resources and the outlets to express themselves so that we can improve. Going from a solo practitioner to a firm where we now have 3 attorneys and 10 other staff, I can't keep my hand on the pulse of everything anymore. So I had to learn the humility, quite frankly, of delegating those kinds of things to, for example, our operations manager, so that he can use his skills to make sure our staff is strong and stable.
Sure. That's some good insight there. Okay. How do you know who you can provide the most value to in the marketplace? So your clients how do you know who you can work with? Was that just, learning that initial 1031 exchange piece that you talked about earlier, and then you just kind of grew it from there and it evolved? Or did you have some intentionality on, I know I can work with this type of person and provide this type of value, and then you built it from there?
Well, I'll answer that several ways. First, for me personally, if I know the technical parts of what I'm talking about from A to Z, inside and out, then I am not worried in my interactions with the client on proving that I'm competent. So that frees me up to then use the other side of my brain, which is the emotional intelligence. And so I'm aware that I naturally connect with certain types of people. And I also know that there are some types of people that would never click with me. And so that's why in our business, the first time you come and see us, it's free, because the client has to have an opportunity to determine if I'm smart, if I'm competent, and whether, it sounds silly, whether they like me. Because your estate planning attorney should be someone you have a long-term relationship with. So the intentionality is, hey, I better know my stuff. And to that end, I have often repeated courses with an association I belong to of the most basic things that we do. I have gone over it and over it and over it years not every year, but every couple, 3 years, just so that I can continue to peel the onion so that what is at the core of what I do is always fresh, reiterated in my mind, so that it's just second nature for me to be able to discuss those things, so that when a particular client come in, they could be anywhere on the demographic scale, the emotional scale. They may, be very wealthy. They may not. They may have lots of kids. They may not. They may be in a divorce situation, all different kinds of situations. It enables me to adjust on a dime so that when I'm with that particular client, I have a better chance connecting with them because I know my stuff.
So you found it extremely important to know, to be able to respond to who that client is in that situation so that you can react and adapt to that actual personality to make sure that you're maximizing the value for that client.
Well, I think to say it maybe a little more simply, if I am totally convinced that what I'm talking about is good for the client, and I know everything from A to Z on how to do it, if I have that down as second nature, then I have the freedom to then focus on what many people would say is the fluff, but that's really where it happens, because people don't pick you because you can save them a lot of taxes.
Sure.
They pick you because they like you.
Good stuff. Okay, so let's talk about feedback. How do you or your firm, how does your firm garner feedback from your clients, and then how do you implement that?
I don't have a system or a survey that I give a client after we have, done the plan. I do measure it by often when we're finished, the client will, without me provoking them, say things like, "Oh, I just feel so relieved that I finally did this. This is a load off my shoulders. I feel peace of mind." And that's how I know that we've done a good job. If the client, has that expression.
Sure.
I guess another way I measure my feedback is that a significant portion of my business, now 25 years in, is referrals from my current clientele. Okay. When I was building the business, it was about connecting with financial advisors and accountants and other people who would be good referral sources. And I certainly have referral sources that I value and I treasure. But as I've gotten older and have served a lot of clients, I've found that, the referrals from current clients is greater. And I suppose another contribution to that, and maybe this is the system that, we could talk about, is a few years ago, we, meaning myself and Cameron and the whole staff. Cameron is the other partner of Parks and Jones. He's 20 years my junior, so that means he's 7. No, he's 33, I'm 53. And, when Cameron came along and the staff grew, we were able finally to offer the last piece of the service that I had always wanted to offer. And that was, we call it the client maintenance program, annual maintenance program, client care, whatever you want to call it. But it was a physical manifestation of acknowledging that what we were creating were long-lasting professional relationships. In the early days, I was very intent and meant it when I told clients, I want to stay in touch. I want you to call me with questions. You probably need to look at this every 3 to 5 years and make sure that, your documents are up to date, because the law is going to change, your assets are going to change, I'm going to get smarter, things of that nature. And maybe 25% of clients would come back, but, I don't even have a metric for that. Maybe it's higher, maybe it's lower. But I always felt a little bad that even though we had created this relationship, there were things that I was not having the opportunity to check on. And then when that client would die, the whole plan wasn't ruined, but maybe they forgot to get a new asset titled properly. Or maybe they didn't come in after, a certain tax law had been changed or a Supreme Court ruling had changed how we do things. And so their plan wasn't perfect. It wasn't terrible, but it wasn't perfect. Well, once we had enough manpower, we were able to implement this annual maintenance program. And it's not for every client, but what it has done is made the burden of maintaining your estate plan our burden and not the client's, because we intentionally reach out to them every year to verify that their assets are still the assets that we think they have and that they're properly titled. That gives them the opportunity to call me and email me at any time without any additional charge. We provide 4 quarterly workshops a year now. We have an annual event. We have a lot of different services that we package, if you will, in the context of the annual maintenance program. And what that has done is, I think it's also increased our referrals, because we're on the minds of those over 500 families now that are on our program. They think about us more. So if somebody mentions, oh, what should I do about my estate plan? They're more likely to think about us.
Sure.
So that is one way, I suppose, we measure, the client experience, is that we now have an annual maintenance program where we're constantly in touch with our clients, and business is good.
Yeah. Would you say that that intentionality that you brought to your clients, the value that you brought via that program, increased your customer retention rate as well?
Well, retention, a lot of people look at estate planning as one and done. You're in, you get a stack of documents, and you're gone. And I've tried in my practice to shift that paradigm from being merely transactional, meaning, it's like if you got a speeding ticket, you go to the lawyer, you get it fixed, you're done, you're not going to see that lawyer again. A lot of people think you just come in, you get your documents, and you're done. Well, trying to change the paradigm from the very beginning to that of being a long-lasting professional relationship, first of all, helped, create some retention, referrals, etc. But I think you're right. The annual maintenance program has made that greater. Yeah. I'm sure it has.
Of course. Well, I think our listeners would enjoy hearing that about, if you can continue to increase your customer retention rate, provide more value, and then get more word of mouth referrals, you're keeping your clients,
right? And
then you're growing your business. And so I think that was a great insight that you just posed.
And it helps build the bridge between when the client comes to you and creates their plan until the time when they need the plan to actually work. A young family in their mid-30s with young children needs to do their estate plan. The likelihood, though, that it's going to be needed is pretty low because, people typically don't die in their 30s or become disabled.
Sure.
But the time between when you set it up and when you need it could be a very long time. And obviously, the business model is whenever the family passes, we hope the family hires us. And so we do things even fee-wise to make it more likely that the family will come to us. We also, as part of our service, when we finish an estate plan for a client, even if you're not on annual maintenance, we want to meet with your family to explain the plan to them. Well, that has a couple of benefits. One, it prepares the family to know what's coming so that they aren't paralyzed by ignorance and fear at the time they need to act. But also, it introduces me to the generation who will be making the decision, well, who's going to help us settle the estate?
Sure.
So the client maintenance program helps keep that bridge a little more solid so that we get, frankly, the business when the family passes.
No doubt. Okay, so let's talk about, this is kind of one of my favorite questions. What has been one of your favorite challenges or failures or apparent failures at the time that you faced, but that has actually set you up for later success?
When I first read that question, something that happened very early in my career jumped into my mind. And it's only a failure if you don't learn from it, but right. I learned from it. My very first paralegal, who just happened to reach out to me yesterday, I hadn't talked to her in a while, but she was my first paralegal, and we became friends. And I was going through a difficult time in my personal life, and she was working with me, and in walked a client that wasn't dressed very well, didn't have a lot of assets, didn't smell so good, and I don't remember exactly the circumstances of it, but I was, in her opinion, dismissive of this gentleman, as if I was too good to deal with a client of that stature. And fortunately, she had the confidence and relationship with me to say, Clancy, if you continue to behave like that with clients, you're going to lose your business. And it was just a huge wake-up call because I'd gotten a little cocky. I'd gotten to the stage where I wasn't worried if business was going to come in the door. But, it was early. It was the early success. And that was humbling to be told by your paralegal, someone that I should be mentoring, but she sat me down and very sternly told me that that was unacceptable behavior. And she was right, and it cut me down to size, It's kind of like when I was a kid, I was a holier than thou little 7-year-old, and my dad was at his office hammering something, and he hit his thumb, and he shouted, "Damn!" And I read the riot act to him about how unholy that was and sinful and blah, 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 blah. And he just looked at me and he said, Clancy, are you done being holier than thou? And that was another humbling moment when my father, who I idolized, could speak that kind of truth to me. And it changed me,
Sure.
And that incident with my first paralegal, it changed me that I am no better than anybody else. I just happen to be good with words and explaining things and writing. That's what I'm good at. And, it may not be fair that the society pays somebody with those skills more than someone who teaches our children or takes our garbage off the curb or whatever. So that one experience, was humbling and hopefully keeps me grounded and centered, because I do realize that if you do have emotional intelligence and you do know the technical parts of whatever you're talking about from A to Z, you have great power to persuade and even manipulate people to do things that may not be in their best interest. And at the end of the day, it takes good character. And I'm not holding myself up as, the poster child for good character, but the point is I'm very aware of the power that I have, that Cameron has, that Kara, our other partner in the firm, has. And we always want to be reminded of exactly who we are. Don't take ourselves too seriously. Be grateful for what we have. And hopefully that would never lead us down a path where we would put our own interests ahead of our client.
Yeah. Wow. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. So do you have a quote that you live your life by or think of often?
Well, again, let's talk about my dad. He always would repeat to me, Clancy, you are where you are in life because that is exactly where you want to be. And technically that may not always be true, but if you believe and you live your life by that, then you have no excuse when you're unhappy or depressed or not thriving like you thought you would. It's nobody else's fault, and maybe it really is. But if you act as if it's not, and you take the bull by the horns and change your circumstances, then your life's better. And it's really not about circumstances. It's about your beliefs. What do you believe about yourself? This past weekend I was in Montana. I achieved being in all 50 states. So I'm proud of that. But met a lady who was a lovely person. But 3 or 4 times a day, she would say things about herself that were negative. There was an example of she wasn't in any of the pictures. She was taking the pictures. And I said to her, why don't you get in the pictures? Oh, I hate my picture being taken. I said, well, maybe your kids would like to have some memories of you, in pictures. And she said, my kids can just forget me when I'm gone. And this is a woman who adores her children.
Sure.
And it just struck me that she has a belief somewhere that needs to be challenged, because it would help her life if she would change that. So, the quote that I give credit to my father for, that's something that I reflect on often. And, I'm weak, I'm insecure, I have fear, but if I abide in that state, it's my own fault.
Sure.
So I'm trying to, peel the onion and figure out what are my own beliefs and how are they limiting my experience today.
Good stuff. So let's take a step back in time. You're sitting across from 20-year-old Clancy right now.
Who had hair.
Sure. What advice would you give to that 20-year-old self?
I read that question and I was really, frankly, at a loss. But as I sit here thinking about that, 20-year-old Clancy, very different person than who I am today. He was trying to make everything perfect on the outside because he didn't feel perfect on the inside. And I would like to have maybe calmed him and assured him so that he didn't have to be so rabidly perfectionistic in those early years. But, then at the same time, if he hadn't had those issues, he may not have built the firm and helped the people that were helping. I mean, I take a lot of pride in the fact that I'm part of an organization now that helps feed and clothe 13 employees. Mm-hmm. I get a lot of pride over helping people. So, it's not that I would change the past, but, there was a lot of angst in that 20-year-old that, as a 53-year-old who's a lot more compassionate than he was at 20, would have liked just to put his hand on his shoulder and say, it's all going to be all right. You're already fine the way you are. Chill out a little bit.
Sure. Good stuff. All right, Clancy, what's one key takeaway from our conversation for our audience to implement in regard to client experience?
Well, I think maybe we kind of hit on it just a second ago. I think every business owner should check what they're believing and be intentional about getting very specific what they believe on, their financial goals, their personal goals, their emotional goals. Think about that. Think about what you're believing today, because you do attract what you think about. If you are convinced you're going to fail, you have a greater chance of failing. If you're convinced you're going to succeed, you have a greater chance to succeed. Now, those are very broad, general beliefs, but if you can boil it down into specifics, I think, things will be better.
Sure. So are there any exciting projects or new things that you have coming up soon that you'd like our listeners to hear about?
In what respect? You mean professionally?
Professionally, yeah. Specifically with your, the firm or the business and how that's pertaining to your clients.
Well, we just had an exciting event where Cameron became more invested, if you will, in the firm. And so it is exciting to see kind of a transition for both of us and the firm to where we continue to grow, we continue to reach out, we refine what we're good at. But, for so many years it was the Clancy Show.
Sure.
And now it's the Parks and Jones Show, meaning it's really not dependent upon a personality anymore. It's more about a process. And processes can be managed, reviewed, changed, and implemented,
sure.
And it's not so personal. It frankly took a while for me to divorce myself from the Clancy Show to the process.
Sure.
But I'm proud of being able to do that. It took some humility. Good thing our operations manager is a psychologist, because it took a lot of therapy, if you will, to make that transition. But now we have a much broader foundation to where we can help more people and in more ways than what I was able to do alone, for those first 18 years.
Sweet. Well, good deal. So how can our listeners get in contact with you, or how can they follow the business?
Well, we have a website, parksjones.com. Excuse me. We have a Facebook business page, Parks and Jones, you could find. Our phone number is 417-823-9898. That's how you stay in touch.
Perfect. Well, Clancy, it's clear that you're passionate about the value that you provide to the marketplace, the value that you provide to your clients, and then how your clients experience you. And so I thank you so much for being on the podcast, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. It was fun this early in the morning.
Thank you for listening in on another episode of the CX Architect Podcast. As always, we would love to get your feedback on this episode and other episodes. If you liked it, if you pulled out any nuggets to implement, things like that. If you like this episode and are listening on your phone, take a quick screenshot and post it to Facebook or Instagram. Let me know what you thought, and then use hashtag CXArchitect and tag me in it so I can see your feedback. You can also head over to clientexperiencearchitect.com/podcast to find the show notes and a place to leave some feedback. Please let us know what you'd like to hear more of. And if you like the show and believe others might benefit from it, we'd love it if you share it up and leave a 5-star review on iTunes. Doing that will help more people discover the show. And with that, I appreciate you and thank you for listening. Have an awesome day.